Welcome to Austin on the Air, candid conversations about air filtration and air quality and the impact it has on children and adults at school, work, and home. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Austin on the Air. We have another episode. It's a really interesting episode. Today I have a very special guest with me. It's my husband, Tim. So welcome.
Hello.
So I brought him on the show today because we have a mold story that I felt like was really interesting. We get a lot of people that write in, that call in, that get on our website looking for information about mold. And so we have quite the story to tell. So I'm happy that you're here. Thank you for coming on. I know it's not your
happy
first
to
choice.
be here. I think we do have an interesting story to tell. We have our own personal mold story, and just another aspect where I think the Austin air purifiers can be helpful in a home setting. So yeah. I'm excited to talk about it.
All right. Maybe I will start then, I guess. It starts, for the background for our listeners who aren't aware, it started probably, 3 years ago?
Yeah, about 4 years ago now.
Yeah. So we were living away at the time and getting ready to move back home to our hometown. It's where you and I went to school, where our grandparents were friends. And it was supposed to be this really exciting time. We had no idea what we were getting into at the time, in hindsight. But we, we're looking for houses, and we were in that process of we looked at several, and there wasn't a whole lot on the market.
No, there wasn't a lot on the market at that time. And the one that we did find, which is the house we ended up purchasing that we really liked, there were a few flaws with it. We thought they were cosmetic things that we could deal with. There was some strange smells and a lot of candles burning when we did our walkthroughs and different things like that. And like most people, we figured, the owners and the realtor were just trying to cover up pet smells or whatever. So
the candles were there was a lot of candles.
I remember
why are there candles in every room? But like you said, it was okay, we knew that there was pets. You could tell just on the walkthrough, but we didn't really see any other indicators that there would be.
No, there was no, water stains on the walls, no watermarks on the ceiling. The basement actually has drop ceiling, so I don't know how many of you know, but when there's a leak on a drop ceiling tile, it shows pretty quick. There was none of that.
Yeah.
Didn't look like there was any damage to flooring or anything other than, little imperfections from pets and things. So
right. And the house is actually built on a hill. So most of the downstairs we had walkout doors, floor to ceiling windows. So it wasn't a basement situation where you'd think okay, it's a musty basement, it's totally underground. It wasn't even a situation like that, which I really liked about the house. That was one of the things that
I think having that extra living space with the natural light coming in, not a true basement, so the whole back half of the house, like Stacy said, it's walkout. So definitely gives you some added living space and area kind of for the kids to have their own space. And
that was the goal.
That was the goal, right?
That was the goal.
As we'll find out later, there were times where we couldn't be in the basement.
Right. So and because we thought it was pets, one of the first things we did, we replaced all the carpets in the house, thinking, okay, it's pet dander. And the house itself was it's almost 5,000 square feet.
Yeah, 4,800, something like that. It's a large home.
So we replaced almost 3,000 square feet worth of carpet. We're all right, we're good. Right.
And I think a lot of people, when they move into a new home, they want to replace carpets. It's one thing that, I don't know, for me anyway, it always kind of grossed me out. I want to be walking on these carpets. Who knows what went on before I got here. So, and that and the smell. And actually, when we replaced the carpets, it did take care of a lot of the smell. So we thought we were good. Okay, we got this piece done, and now we can start living in the home the way we want to live in it, and use it the way we want to use it. So,
although in hindsight, I think for me, I started having these symptoms from day one. Actually day one, I remember we moved in and we got everything carried in, all the boxes or whatever. And I remember that first night going to bed, and I was having a panic attack or something. I had all this anxiety, and I'm thinking, okay, I've pushed myself too hard. I haven't gotten much sleep. We've been on the go. We stayed at your parents the night before. We were living out of suitcases. And so I thought, okay, I'm just maxed out. And so that was like the first symptom, I guess. And it didn't really resolve right away as we got unpacked. And then all of a sudden, like, I was having all these other things. I had like crazy ADHD, which, okay.
Was that really new?
So the increased ADHD symptoms like were new. And I thought to myself, well, this isn't me. And then all of a sudden I was having more and more anxiety. I was having palpitations. I started gaining all this weight. And I'm like, what is going on? And at first it was, a lot of this was insomnia, you know.
You were sharing your symptoms with me, and I was kind of blowing it off like, oh, okay, yeah, it's stress. We're in a new situation. Yeah. Like you said, we're living out of suitcases, not quite settled. We were, trying to work on the carpets and this and that. So I'm just like, well, it's just a lot going on. And
actually I attributed a lot to COVID, because that was also, we moved right in the heat of COVID, like right in the beginning of COVID. We actually, we closed on our house in the parking lot in a car.
Yeah, very unique situation with our home closing. We had to meet, the closing company and the lawyers, everything. We had to park in a parking lot at kind of an office building, and we weren't allowed to leave our vehicles.
We had masks in the vehicles.
We had masks on. They came. They kind of handed papers through the cracked window, and we had to sign them, and
it was a whole thing.
Stick them back through. It was
But that was when like everybody. So the kids weren't. So like the kids started school, but then everybody was home.
Right.
Like, they shut schools down. We were working from home. The kids were doing school from home. Like our Wi-Fi and Zooms were like maxed out. So all these symptoms are continuing, and actually I'm getting more and more symptoms, and I'm thinking, okay, well, we had the stress of moving, but now actually there's this whole other thing.
It's like a whole new world. Everyone was worried, right? It was brand new, and not used to having your kids home every day. They're home. There's a million people. We have 4 children, so somebody always has a question, a problem. Meantime, we're trying to work, and it was very stressful. So it was easy for us to attribute some of these health problems to all the stress of the situation. So.
And I was getting frustrated because I'm thinking, at this point, like I'm gaining more and more weight, and I've got all these different symptoms, and I'm, as a certified health coach, like I've coached like hundreds of different people on how to get healthy. And here I was at this time going, what the heck, I'm falling apart. And then like COVID kind of, we got through it, the pandemic, things opened up, went back to semi-normal, right? And so kids went back to school, all this kind of evolved, but yet I wasn't getting better. I was actually in some ways getting worse. And then I actually got COVID. I got COVID really bad.
It was Thanksgiving of that year, and it was very bad. It was severe. It was a severe case, and it was scary because while things were starting to open back up, there was still a lot of concern about what would happen to you if you got it. And and I got it really bad. I was like weeks, and I was actually, that's when I was just starting with Austin. In fact, at that time I had to actually push back my start date. I don't know if you remember, like, because I was supposed to start, and I was like, I have COVID. And I remember at the time though, it was like such a blessing in disguise, because I'm like, all right, I need an air purifier, like pronto. And I mean, when we got the air purifier, I felt like, okay, at least our home is being protected. Right.
Which I feel like, I mean, you got it, but...
Yeah, I got COVID shortly after you did, and my case was nowhere near as severe as yours. But at that time, you were in communication with Austin about pushing your date back and the reasons why, and they were gracious enough to send you a purifier right away.
Yeah,
the kids didn't get it,
no,
and I think a big reason for that was we had an air purification system that was protecting all of us from each other, I guess.
Yeah. So. The air in the home was being recirculated and cleaned as we were going into that. After COVID, though, I remember like some of my symptoms got better, and like I used to have these asthmatic coughs. I guess is the only way to like describe them. It was like something I had never had before that I developed just here, like before COVID. That got better, like after COVID. And in hindsight, like I'm looking at some of the things that went away and I'm thinking, oh, that was the air purifier.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
because I remember talking during that time and thinking like, well, we just moved back. Maybe, our bodies aren't used to the allergens around here. Because I remember when we moved away, my allergies got horrible because just, different types of pollens in the air. And so I think we were initially thinking, well, it's just that your body will adjust and you'll get over it. But
mine became very severe and I was like, what the heck is this? And then my panic attacks, my anxiety, like, with the air purifier, I remember those two symptoms were the ones that were like the big ones for me. I was like, okay, I had COVID. COVID was terrible. Now I'm better from COVID, but like I'm better from a couple of these other symptoms. And the only thing that changed really was the air purifier. So I feel like that really helped in that situation. But there was still a lot like going on at that time, and I still was having the other symptoms, and I'm like, what is going on? So I remember like I went to multiple doctors. I was
and ultimately you ended up at the Cleveland Clinic,
right?
Because,
Cleveland Clinic.
You had seen so many doctors, and we just couldn't get answers for these other problems that were still persisting. So it's like, well, let's go to the experts and.
Yeah, and I actually went to functional medicine at Cleveland Clinic, because I had been to like every doctor known to man, I feel like, before that. And I remember sitting there and I'm going through everything and she just looked at me and she's like, I'm pretty sure you have mold toxicity. And I'm like, what? Mold?
From
like,
where?
Where would I have mold? And then she's like, I'm 99% sure based on talking to you. She's like, but let's run some labs and do some tests. And, lo and behold, that's what it was. And I remember her telling me, she's like, listen, you have it bad. Like, you need to do something. You need to find where the mold is, where the exposure's coming from. If it's your house, she's like, get your house. And I remember her even telling me, she's like, get a camper, put it in your driveway. Like, you can't live in your house. And I was like, what? Like, whoa, I don't even know if it is my house. But at the time, that's really, And then I came home.
When you came home and told me that, I'm like, whoa, back up. We just bought this house. It wasn't cheap. We're not putting a camper in the yard. Let's just, but at the same time, it was scary because, we finally had an answer for some of your symptoms. And it was something that, mold toxicity is not something to play around with. It can really wreak havoc with your body, and ultimately it can kill you. So it was so many different emotions at that time. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, we already did so much work. We already replaced carpets, like, because we thought it was pet, like, but where is it? There's no, and I think mold is one of those things that affects people in so many different ways. Like, I was having all these different symptoms, but not everybody in the house was having the same symptoms. Right. And in hindsight, I was having my own symptoms, but, I'm a hard-headed male, so it's like, I just rub some dirt on it and move on, But in hindsight, there was some symptoms that I had. I had a constant sore throat. I had, I was getting my own insomnia. I actually saw a doctor for that and was prescribed a sleep aid. So I had some things going on too, that at the time, like I said, being a hard-headed male, these are things you deal with. You power through, but
I think that's the insomnia, I think, was the one common denominator. Like, so we have 4 kids and both of us, all 6 of us at one point
we're on a prescription sleep aid. Right.
Nobody in this house could sleep. Like, everybody had different things that they were dealing with, but the one common denominator was the insomnia. And
for example, I had the perpetual sore throat. Our 14-year-old daughter, well, she was 12 or 13 at that time, but she had a constant coughing problem. Like, she felt like she had to get something up. It was just nonstop.
And her ears were always plugged.
She always felt like she needed to pop her ears. And everyone had their own thing, but you're right. The insomnia was something that was across the board. We all really struggled with.
And I think too, like, you don't realize just because it's so prevalent, but it affects everybody so differently because of, your genetic makeup. Even from the same family. You know, I have the HLA-DR gene, so I don't make antibodies to mold. So my body just stores it and accumulates it, ironically, in fat tissue. So here I am gaining all this weight, and it was my body's way of protecting me. My body's way of saying, okay, I'm gonna save you from this, and we're gonna store it, you know?
Yeah.
And so in hindsight, it all makes sense now. But at the time, it was like, what
It was
the
puzzling.
heck?
Like,
Yeah.
couldn't figure out what was going on with you or any of us.
Right.
And at the same time, you know, so, all right, we figured we have a mold problem somewhere. So now we have to try to find it.
Yeah.
So if there's a problem with your house, what's the first phone call you make? Let's call the insurance company.
Right.
Let's see what our coverage is. And we called, and I believe it was, oh, you had a leak? You had a pipe burst? Like, no. Well, if you didn't have an active leak or a pipe burst, then it's not covered.
Right.
So now, you know, you start worrying about, okay, how are we going to pay for all this? Because testing and finding and none of that stuff is cheap. I'm an environmental person, so I know what these lab tests cost and what it costs when you have to bring in an abatement company. And it's, you know, in my back of my mind, I'm trying not to say anything because I know the health is most important, but at the same time, I'm trying to rack my brain. How are we going to afford to do all this? And where's it going to end? Because,
especially because we couldn't find it.
Right. We couldn't find it at first.
At first we couldn't, like, we looked ourselves, and then it was like, okay, we don't see any water in this house anywhere. There's no damage. So we had to call a company, but then at the same time, you know, they come in, and I remember the first time the guy came, and he's like, okay, where do you want to start? And there you have to choose, okay?
Yeah, so where there's water,
square foot
kitchen,
house.
the bathrooms, the laundry area, that, you know, that's where we started.
Right, and it didn't end up being where we thought.
Because, you know, we're thinking where there's water. Yeah.
Right, and
my brother even, you know, he does plumbing and heating for a living, so we even called on him. Hey, can you look around? Look at our plumbing fixtures, you know, likely places. And he didn't find anything either. So
right. So the company that came, Britt, he was super awesome from A Hold of Mold Environmental. He came in, and it was like chasing a ghost, right? We didn't know where to start, and we're like, okay, we can't air quality test every single square inch of this house. It's too big. Like, we're going to spend a fortune. So he kind of walked us through. He's like, all right, so you're having symptoms. You've been to the doctor. They've proven you've been exposed to mold. He's like, where do you spend the most of your time? He's like, let's start there. Well, at the time, I spent most of my time in my office, which was downstairs, but it wasn't anywhere near any water. Like, it was in a downstairs room, but it was on the opposite side of the house as like any plumbing or anything.
Yeah, like I said early on, you know, we have drop ceiling in the basement, so all our plumbing is pretty easy to get at, just up above the drop ceiling. And you know, like you said, there is no plumbing there. There's no water lines. There's no you know, sewer lines, no water supply lines. We have hot water heat here. There was no heat runs in the ceiling there. So we never suspected that could be a location. No, when people think of mold, they think, oh, black mold. Well, our mold wasn't black mold because it wasn't really caused from water. It was a different strain called aspergillus. It's a white mold. It's not black. And so
when we got the testing back, he's like, all right, there's mold in your office. And I'm thinking, okay, how? When we moved in, we replaced the carpets in that room. So there's brand new carpets. We didn't see any mold when we put that carpet down.
And it should be noted, this is a basement, so there's no wood underneath the carpet there. It's concrete.
Right. And my office had floor to ceiling windows. So I'm like, we checked the windows. They weren't leaking. They weren't, you know, in any way damaged. So he's like, all right. So he comes back and he opens up the drop ceiling.
Yeah.
And bingo.
Yeah, there. Found some stuff up there in the drop ceiling left over from someone who lived here before.
There was a lot of, must have been a teenager's bedroom or something. They would store old moldy beer and garbage.
A place to hide empty beer cans, I think. And
Yep. And so it was full. The entire ceiling of my office was full of just moldy stuff. And even Britt, he was like, well, this is a first.
Leave it to us.
Yeah.
Another first.
So yeah, we're the family of firsts. But we found it. It was totally unexpected. And so, Britt was like, he was awesome. His company, they filled an entire van.
Yeah, like a big cargo work van, like a Sprinter van. I'm not sure if that's the brand they have, but yeah, a big work van.
They filled it.
They went in there and, put the negative air in there and vented everything properly and started going about the remediation. Yeah. And they just kept taking out bag after bag after bag
of moldy
of, all the ceiling tiles had to go, obviously.
And I think what was interesting too, though, is so if you think about where it was located in the basement and then that drop ceiling, so it got like the floor joists, so like in the other room next to it, our daughter's bedroom, and then a couple rooms over in that utility room, there was a ton of aspergillus mold. And again, we had looked there, but it was this like very almost transparent, but not like a white film on the floor joists.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember there is, once we found it there, we assumed we treated all the adjoining areas, and we replaced all that ceiling tile in those 2 rooms, thinking, okay, we got it now because it can just flow through there. But there's some, footers and headers that were pretty solid that we thought, okay, it probably isolated to these areas. So we did that, had Britt and his company do the remediation.
They
cleaned it, and we replaced the ceiling tiles. So we thought we were good.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget is when you have mold like that, the mycotoxins. And I think, you deal with the spores and you make sure that you're getting the mold out. But those mycotoxins, those are the like very, very, very small, almost gaseous byproducts. They're very toxic and harmful that are produced from different molds. The mycotoxins that were in our house, I think, were the things that were so problematic for me personally, for all of us, really. And I shudder to think, actually, now looking back on that, because after I got COVID and, started working for Austin Air, we got so many purifiers and we had them all over the house. And I think that saved us. Like,
I agree.
The amount of mold.
We had them in every bedroom. We have them in the main living areas. So we're constantly recirculating the air in here, but definitely helped. It could have been a lot worse for all of us.
Right. And then the remediation company, once they cleaned it and they removed what was causing it, then it was like, okay, now we have to figure out the carpets, the furniture, the couches, the bedding, because when you have that exposure, those mycotoxins, even the spores, everything is contaminated. And it's not as simple as, okay, we cleaned and we had them come in and do the mold, but we still weren't free of it because it was in everything.
Right. And I'll be honest with you, at the time, we'd already spent a bunch of money, and I was like, well, we took care of the problem, and I'm like, we don't really need to do anything else. And
I was still
at the same time, you were still really suffering with some of these symptoms. So it's like, okay, let's start with the carpet in this room. So we have the large family room downstairs,
which is
brand new carpet pretty much. I'm like, all right, we'll agree to take that out, but to save some money, because we've already spent a lot, I'm just going to do it myself. So, like a hard-headed idiot that I am, I went down there with no personal protective equipment or anything, and I started cutting out carpet and hauling it out through the sliding doors down there. And we actually got a dumpster at the time that was parked in our driveway.
Yeah.
I was carrying it around. How do you carry a rolled up carpet like this right next to your nose and mouth and ears? And then, a couple days later, I got really sick. My lymph nodes swelled up. My ear pain was horrible. Had a lot of things going on where I needed to go see the doctor. So I went and saw our family doctor and kind of explained to him what we were dealing with. And he's like, well, yeah, you have all this is because of mold exposure.
Yeah.
And then like a light bulb went off in my head, like, wow, Stacy's right about this mycotoxin stuff. I think it's everywhere. So
And that's when, I mean, we had that giant dumpster already in the driveway, so it became a matter of, okay, crap, like the carpets have to go, but like
then you start thinking
couldn't
about
do
all
it.
the things that are fabric, you know,
We threw out our couches, we threw out our
mattresses, any fabric furniture
pillows,
from down there,
anything. Like we filled. How big was that dumpster?
It was a 40-yard dumpster.
We filled it.
It was the biggest, you know, roll-off. They called roll-off container, the biggest one you can get.
So we moved into this house. We laid all new carpet, remodeled it, because yay, we're home.
Yep.
And then we took it all out and threw it in a dumpster.
Yep.
And at that time, it was winter, and so we realized, okay, this isn't something that you can do.
It was a bigger
yourself.
scope than what I could do, but I will say, you know,
for safety though too.
Yeah.
I mean.
But I will say, you know, some of the stuff I did do myself definitely had the purifiers going where I was working after that carpet incident. I'm like, I need to do something to protect myself when I am working around anything that's going to disturb this.
Yeah.
So.
And when we had, Britt's company, A Hold of Mold Environmental, they had to, after you started the carpet, we had to call them and be like, okay, we need professionals to finish this job because it's not safe. It's not safe for us, for you, you know, to do it ourselves.
Or to just stir it all up without the, you know, positive or negative pressure of keeping it contained to their containment zone.
And so they were great. They're like, okay, we're gonna be right out. Except it was winter, and that's when we had that giant snowstorm. So I remember, like, they started it. They came and they, you know, did a few days, I think it was, and we literally had at that point half the house like taped off. Like
couldn't go downstairs.
Couldn't go downstairs. Like a couple of the bedrooms, and even like our master bedroom at one point. Like you'd walk in our master bedroom and all of the subflooring was gone. You just looked down to the basement. So like half the house was.
It was half gutted, and our house was about half gutted. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we literally had the 6 of us. Remember Christmas? So then they couldn't finish it. So because of the snowstorm, we were snowed in. They couldn't get to us. So on Christmas, we were all just cooped up in our living room.
Yeah.
And it was
just like it's supposed to be on the holidays, close to your family, right?
Yes.
Yeah. A little too close, maybe.
Yeah. One of our daughters had foot surgery at that time. And so she got the good recliner because, you know, foot surgery. We got a puppy at that time.
Yeah. But then we were stuck with needing to put it back together on a limited budget because of how much we had spent getting rid of the problem. So, you know, I started doing what I could do, you know, taking on projects myself. The bathroom, you know, had to replace the flooring there. Like I said, my brother's a plumber, so he helped me replace the shower. And it's like, well, things are torn apart. Let's set it up the way we want. So actually put a tile shower in the one bathroom. And
tile, like I was so scared when you started that tile.
Yeah.
Thank God for the air purifiers.
Right, because the waterproof membrane you kind of paint it on, and it is very potent smelling. It's
terrible.
So you're in a small space to begin with. You're in a bathroom, right? And you've got this stuff and you're slathering it all over the walls. Like you said, thank goodness for the purifiers because it's the kind of thing that, you know, can cause you to pass out from smelling it for too long.
Yeah, but the purifier, he had it in there, like.
I didn't at first, and I'm like, oh, I better grab one of those because this stuff smells pretty potent. So
you cranked it up to
after a very
3.
short time, you know, I was starting to get a little woozy and feel it in my head, and then I turned the purifier on, and it was night and day. So can't recommend having them around enough if you're doing any kind of construction projects, even just the dust that you generate.
The drywall
Dust, you know, sawdust, any chemicals or paint that you're working with. It's really a godsend when you're doing that kind of work.
Yeah, we had it all. I mean, between all the different types of projects that we did.
And plumbing and flooring and showers and bathroom fixtures.
Yeah, so I feel like we used the purifiers like to get us through to capture all like the mycotoxins and the mold spores, and then it was like we weren't free of them. We still
No,
very
you
much
had to put it back
needed
together
them.
and create, use products and create an environment that's also not the cleanest air to be working in and living in.
Right.
So yeah, they
really help,
really
especially
were
with
great.
kids.
Yeah.
I mean, because of all that, like we were doing this, you were doing this, like in the home while we were still here. It wasn't like the family had left and it was just like a vacant home.
No.
We were all still,
And there were still contractors here too. I mean, I couldn't take everything on, so we had some local contractors in here doing some of the work, and I even told them, like, hey, wherever you guys are working today, take one of these with you. And they even commented, they're like, wow, it's like I go home at the end of the day and my nose isn't all
from the
stuffy
drywall
or glued shut with drywall dust and sawdust. So they appreciated it too. Yeah. So yeah, definitely helpful.
And even when we were, I think, through all of the construction, we finally, it took so long, got everything remodeled and put back together. But I think even still the air purifiers, because we use so many different new materials. And I think that's one thing that people forget, like when you have new flooring, paint, like we put in the downstairs living room, we made it a gym. So we got that
like rubberized flooring,
rubberized
all
flooring.
that stuff. It's off-gassing.
It's off-gassing continually, so like even after the construction process, like the air quality still was a problem without the purifiers because of all the new materials that we.
Not to mention the unprecedented wildfire smoke that we've been dealing with on and off all summer from the Canadian wildfires, and so they're.
It was one thing after another, and it seemed like the one thing that helped us the most through almost every single phase of that was definitely the Austin air purifiers, I would say. I mean,
I don't know how many times something has happened since we've gotten, or placed purifiers in our home. It's like, man, thank goodness we have those, whether it's the wildfires or, the construction projects, the mold, the sickness running through, schools and the kids bring it home. It's just.
Or even the allergies, the things that you want to open the windows during, the summer spring, but, but the allergy season that we've had, that was a lot. So I think at every stage, and so thankful. It's come in handy for so many different things. So I don't know. I think our story, I look at, now I belong to all these different mold Facebook groups, right? Because like during that time.
You live an exciting life.
I know. It's my thing. So I'm part of all these different groups, and it's like, it was helpful during our journey because to see like how many other people suffer with the same thing, or how many people, I remember at one point when I was like, okay, I know that this is mold. I don't know if, and then I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if he's gonna believe me, if he's gonna think it's mold, and then I would get on these groups, and then there's like these other people like, how did you tell your spouse? And, and it, I think because it affects people so differently and people don't always attribute it to it. Luckily, like, we're cool that way, so we can talk things out. But like, not everybody.
I did have my doubts. It's like, mold's everywhere. Yeah, there's probably some. They're probably going to find some because it's everywhere. It's like it's naturally occurring. It's gets in places. It's outside. Yeah, they're going to find some mold.
But to the extent that we had it, and then there's so many people out there that are experiencing. Maybe not the exact same thing. Maybe they didn't have beer in their ceiling, but they're dealing with mold of some sort, and they're dealing with the health impacts of the mold. And
it's frustrating because, like you said, it's like chasing a ghost, right? You don't know where it is, where it's coming from,
right?
How far it's spread. So
right, and not everybody, I feel, even in the medical community, wants to attribute certain health conditions, or any. Rather, I mean, just from my personal experience, the number of places that I had to go and the number of doctors.
I think it's hard to pinpoint because, like you just got finished saying, everyone reacts to it different. It causes different symptoms, and a lot.
So there's no
people,
okay, connecting the dots
Right.
between, okay, this symptom is usually attributed with this disorder. It's like
Right.
mold. It's such a myriad of symptoms that could be, contributed to that. And so I see it so much that I know that's primarily why, I wanted to do this podcast, because I'm thinking our story is
Yeah, kind of
unfortunate.
has a happy ending. I mean,
does.
we went through a lot, but we had
We were able
smart
to
people
Yeah.
and tools to help get us through. The Brits company and the Austin air purifiers are just a godsend through all this. So,
And I think
I think it's important to share that.
I just want to encourage people, our listeners, who suspect that maybe there's mold, or they're not sure. Just explore your options. Make sure you're talking to the right people, the educated people. You keep searching if that's what you're suspecting, and talk to your family too. Keep the lines of communication open. Like, I'm so grateful that we were able to talk through that and not have one against the other. And yes, it's mold. No, it's not. And I feel like sometimes that happens in family too. So we were able to, seek medical help and seek the experts and talk amongst ourselves too. And so, I'm really grateful that it's got a happy ending for sure. So I would encourage, our listeners, we, at Austin Air, we put together a mold toolkit, and it kind of goes through a bunch of different things. It talks about proper remediation, detox, health impacts, testing, all kinds of different things, especially air purification. The right kind of air purification and the wrong. I think that's another key point. There's a lot of people who, might have a mold situation going on at home, and they want to get those cute little things that sit on your desk, and that it's got to make sure that it's the technology recommended by the EPA when you're dealing with something as harmful as mycotoxins and mold spores. So anybody who is interested in that, you can visit our website at www.moldtoolkit.com. Again, that's moldtoolkit.com, and it's got everything that you need to know. It's a lot of the resources that we took advantage of and the things that we did and what we learned. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Austin on the Air. For more information on air filtration, air quality, and respiratory health, visit austinair.com. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Austin on the Air. For more information on air filtration, air quality, and respiratory health, visit austinair.com.